Welcome back to the Squares and Circles podcast, where together we navigate the twists and turns of this wild journey from teenagehood to adulthood. I'm your host Ellie, and I'm so gassed to be back with another episode with you. Get ready to dive into the topic of forgiveness today as we uncover just how important it can be for your mental health. It's going to be an exciting journey. Let's explore and grow through this together. Chapter 1. The Power of Forgiveness. Today we are going to be talking about forgiveness. This is a topic that I think is quite underrated when it comes to self-improvement, growth and healing, because it's way easier, in my experience anyway, to hold a grudge or forget about it and sweep it under the rug, rather than actually taking the time and energy to process and forgive something in order to fully let it go. Now, I'm not just talking about forgiving the people who have wronged you in your life, I'm also talking about forgiving your damn self. We've all done stuff we're not proud of. Don't you ever stay up at night thinking about something that you've said or done and you just can't sleep because you're now wide awake, full of shame or embarrassment? Or maybe you just randomly remember it throughout your day and are filled with these negative feelings for a moment or two. If you haven't been there, you're a lucky sod, because I've definitely been there and it is horrible. And similarly, we all have people who have wronged us throughout our lives, especially as we grow up and we're finding our feet in the world. We go through friendship breakups, romantic breakups, betrayal, and experience hurtful behaviour towards us. And I think it's so easy to hold resentment for people who have made us feel badly in some way, especially if they're no longer a person in your life, so you never see them. And I think as humans, it's natural for us to feel the need to pass the blame for our negative emotions to somewhere else. Now, hear me out here. Of course, if somebody has wronged or upset you, the blame is completely theirs, and what they did to you is not your fault at all. What I mean when I say this is the problems and the trauma that develop from this experience of betrayal or hurt, and the ways that the trauma manifests are your responsibility. Not your fault, but your responsibility to overcome and take care of it. For example, if you've been betrayed by your friend, you are more than likely going to have some form of betrayal trauma. Now, whether you stay friends with that person and work through it or not, you are likely to develop some sort of trauma that might manifest in, let's say, for the sake of the example, lower self-worth or trust issues. There are loads of things it can manifest into, but I'll just use those two as an example. Now, next time you make a friend, or later down the line with this friend that previously betrayed you, you're going to act in ways that show that you have low self-worth and trust issues by doing things such as, for example, causing arguments, which could be easily avoided had you let go of this resentment and processed it fully. So it's not your fault that something bad has happened to you, but it is on you to heal from what has happened to you. And part of this healing, and I think a really big part of the healing, is forgiveness. I don't think that we can fully move on and process and let go of something negative until we have forgiven the person or the circumstance that caused the thing that needs to be forgiven. I also think it's common for people to carry this unforgiveness into other relationships and situations in life. For example, if you were cheated on in a past relationship, it's likely for you to anticipate or fear that a new partner might cheat on you, even if they're doing everything right. Or if you grew up with alcoholic parents, you might be more likely to resent and be upset or annoyed when your friends are drinking too much and too frequently, even if they are actually completely fine and just having fun. This again isn't to say that what happened is your fault. I can't stress that enough. But if you don't take the time to process and release the things that you probably should forgive, it can affect your life indefinitely in so many ways until you do. So I've got a few statistics about forgiveness. You know me, I love to give I'm glitching. I love to give statistics. According to Kim et al., forgiveness decreases anger, anxiety, depression, and increases self-esteem. And Harvard University did some observational studies and some randomized trials, and they also found that forgiveness is associated with lower levels of depression, anxiety, and hostility, and it also is linked to reduced substance abuse, higher self-esteem, and just greater life satisfaction in general. Also, in 2005, Toussaint and Webb reviewed theoretical and empirical data on the link between forgiveness and mental health, and found that there was a direct link between forgiveness and improved mental health, and that unforgiveness can be directly linked to significant mental health problems. And these are just the 3 examples that I chose to include into the episode. There are so many studies done on the link between mental health and forgiveness, and they all pretty much have the same result. Well, the ones that I've looked at anyway, I looked at quite a few. So, what is the importance of letting go? When we hold on to grudges, we keep ourselves tethered to past pain, which can prevent us from growing and evolving into our best selves, which is obviously our goal here, self-improvement and all that. As the studies that I mentioned suggest, letting go is crucial for our emotional well-being, as it allows us to move forward unburdened by the weight of past hurts and to live more fully in the present. Practicing forgiveness can significantly improve our mental health and overall happiness. It is so important that we forgive ourselves for things that make us cringe and feel shame, because the likelihood of more of these things happening in the future is pretty high. And so if we don't let go of them, we'll end up with a huge stack of cringeworthy and shameful moments, and that is no way to go through life. And we deserve more than that. I've personally struggled with forgiving myself for past mistakes. There have been many sleepless nights where I've punished myself for things that I did years ago. But over time, I've learned the importance of self-compassion and the need to let go of these negative feelings in order to move forward. As teenagers, I think forgiveness might kind of seem more like an abstract or unimportant idea. But then as you get older, you kind of learn the importance of it. And we recognise the weight that holding grudges has and the freedom that forgiveness can actually bring to your life. It's a lesson that we often learn the hard way, but it's invaluable for our growth and happiness. I think when we're teenagers, it's so easy to forgive because even though obviously they are problems at the time, it's easy to kind of forgive them because it's not that big of a deal. And also we don't know particularly how to put boundaries in place yet, so we can just forgive and forget and move on. And also I think the whole concept of like school and having to sit in the same classroom with somebody every day can really help to make teenagers forget things. But I don't think that what is happening there is actually forgiveness. I think it's more just forgetting and moving on and cracking on with school and peaceful life and stuff. But I think, I don't know, in my experience anyway, it always leads to more and more and more arguments, more often, more frequent, more brutal each time, because it's just layers and layers of resentment rather than actual forgiveness each time. Whereas that changes when you're adults, because you tend to either fall out with somebody completely, and that's that. You don't be friends with them, that's it, they're out of your life. Or you actually forgive them and move on, and there's no resentment there, and you can build on that relationship again. I think the best example for this that I can relate to my own life is the journey of my relationship with my dad. When I was 18, my parents split up because my dad had found a new lady, and it impacted our relationship quite a lot. Before they broke up, I was super close with my dad, and we had similar hobbies and interests, and I would talk to him about a lot of stuff, and he would be there for me. However, after the breakup, he did try and be a good dad to me, but now with his new partner and his new life, I guess the fact I was an adult as well at 18, he just wasn't the dad I wanted and needed at the time, especially I was going through the divorce. Obviously, I wasn't the one going through the divorce, but I was a fresh child of divorce. I still obviously had to process and go through the breakup of my family. And so for the next 4-ish years after this, my relationship with my dad was super duper rocky. And I can pin that all down to me not forgiving him. I resented him for leaving my mum, I resented him for breaking up the family, and I resented him for no longer being the dad I wanted at the time. And this led to a lot of long conversations, occasional arguments, and on and off talking to him. I had a lot of periods of time where I just decided I didn't want to have a relationship with him ever again, because he was causing me a lot of pain, and I just didn't feel that it was worth having him in my life at all if he was just going to make me feel like that. It might sound a bit unfair to you, but that's how I felt at the time, and that's what I thought would be best for me back then, and I can't really fault myself for doing what I think was best for me. And I think at the time it was. Anyway, when I was 23, I came to the realisation that your relationship with your parents changes as you grow older anyway, and it just so happened that this event happened at a time where the relationship was going to change anyway, so they got divorced at a time that my relationship with my dad was going to change regardless, whether they stayed together or not. Not to say that his not being there for me was warranted or fair on his part. I still very much stand by the fact that he should have been a better dad to me during those times, especially as I was communicating so clearly what I needed and wanted from him, and he just wasn't giving it to me. And also, I kind of realised that this whole situation was on my mind constantly. It was always in the back of my mind, and I would always have people being like, oh, what's going on with your dad, Ellie? And then I don't know, it just wasn't very nice to live like that, even though he wasn't a part of my life at the time. I still thought about him all the time, and so he was a part of my life, if that makes sense, and not in a way that I ever wanted him to be in my life. So these realizations made me think that because my relationship with my dad was so good for the first 18 years of my life, it will be possible to have that again. And I realized that a lot of the issues I had with my dad were because I was holding on to the version of him that he was when he was with my mum, and I hadn't forgiven him for what he did to the family or to me in our relationship or to my mum. And I often thought things like, how could he just throw away our relationship like that when he always tells me how he wants to be in my life, blah, blah, blah. But I only thought this because that's what I expected of him, because I hadn't let go yet of how he had made me feel. So these problems that we had in our relationship were still issues even when he was working to fix them, because I didn't want to see that he was doing that because I resented him, and that's the picture that I had painted in my mind about him. Anyway, once I realised this, I began working on forgiving him. I started to speak to him again, and it was a bit different that time, because all of the other times I started speaking to him again after a period of ignoring him, I'd send him a big long message outlining and detailing every bad thing that he had done and everything he was doing wrong, so that he could clearly know what was going on and why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And then I'd be like, okay, if we can sort this out, we can have a relationship again. But this time was a little bit different. I think, if I remember rightly, I did still send him a long message, but it wasn't so much about what he had done wrong. It was more about, like, me realising what I had done wrong in resenting him and not forgiving him. And, like, I was still saying, like, I stand by everything that I've said, and I still kind of feel like that, but I'm ready to move on, and I don't expect you to be this imagined version of that I've got of you anymore. Like, I want you to be who you are now. But I can't actually really remember what the message said exactly. It was quite a while ago now. But I do remember it feeling very different and having a very different vibe, which was nice. And I've now had a relationship and had him in my life again for like 2 or so years, I think. And he was able to be at my graduation, which is really nice, because all throughout uni, I didn't think that he was going to be there because I didn't want him there. And I was going to have, like, somebody else that was really special to me, like my mum and somebody else. But I'm so glad that he came, because I would have actually been really upset if he wasn't there. The only thing that I am upset about is that I did miss his wedding. But I would not have enjoyed that at the time. I would have had the worst day ever. So I'm also not that upset that I missed it. Our relationship is definitely not the same as when I was younger, but whose relationship with their parents stays the same as they become an adult? I'm going to do a whole episode on this because I think it's such a weird transition personally. But anyway, I think that this story perfectly shows the difference in approaches to forgiveness from being a teenager and to being an adult, and the positive effect that it can have on a relationship. I also think that when we're living with grudges, we tend to take comments a little bit more personally. And I think a big part of the issue with my dad was the fact that I was taking a lot of things he was saying and doing too personally. He was working on our relationship, but when I was so focused on the idea of him being a shit dad, I was taking every little thing really personally. I think I've said that so many times, but anyway. And I think it could be true in so many relationships where we haven't forgiven ourselves or others because we have wounds that haven't healed. And so if anything slightly grazes those wounds, it hurts a lot more than if we were to touch the parts of us that are unwounded, if that makes sense. So it strengthens relationships in that way, because we're no longer so hurt by the things that they do and say, so we can just vibe and not start arguments over silly little things, even though they're not silly if they hurt you, but we can prevent them from hurting us if we work on it. Chapter 2. So what do we do about it? So we're going to kickstart this chapter off by talking about the ways that we can forgive ourselves. So the first thing that we must do is acknowledge our mistakes and practice self-compassion. If we're horrible to ourselves about our mistakes, we will never be able to forgive ourselves and move on. I believe that 9 times out of 10, there are reasons for why we acted and spoke in the ways that we did. And not to say that these reasons are excuses, as we still need to take accountability for what we've done. but we can accept that maybe we weren't in a good situation to act in a way that reflects our best self, or maybe the people that we were surrounded by at the time were negatively influencing how we feel and act in situations. I think it's important to reflect on the lessons that we've learned from these mistakes and use them to influence your future choices and actions in these sorts of relationships or situations. I think we also need to understand that everyone on the planet makes errors. And I know it's something that everybody says all the time, like Hannah Montana has a whole song, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has those days. Anyway, it's so true, as cliche as it is, it's so true that everybody makes mistakes. And these mistakes do not define your worth or make you any less worthy of a person. In fact, I think it's actually the opposite. If you make mistakes and learn from them, they make you a better person because you've taken a situation of adversity and used it to better yourself, which in turn, of course, makes you a better person. Like, I think it's actually a really good thing, even though it does feel horrible to make a mistake. So, now we have nailed how to forgive ourselves. How on earth do we forgive other people? The first thing to understand is that forgiveness frees you from anger. It doesn't condone the behaviour of those who wronged you. Forgiveness isn't about letting people off for their bad behaviour, and it's not something you're doing for the person who's wronged you. It is all for yourself. Forgiveness is a selfish act that frees you from the chains of anger and resentment that prevent you from living freely and being fully open to new experiences. Try to empathise with those who hurt you and maybe try and understand why they may have acted or spoken the way that they did. Maybe see where they're coming from a little bit. Even if you don't know what could have caused them to act or say the things that they did, even just accepting and empathising with the fact that they might just not be a good person. For you, in your life at least. And that they have different values. That is a good enough way to empathise with somebody and understand where they're coming from. If you feel like it would be necessary or beneficial, communicate your feelings openly. When possible, of course. Whether this person is in your life or not, this could be a good move to help you in the process of forgiveness. It can also be good for both fixing a relationship and also for closure to allow yourself to fully move on. I actually did this with my childhood best friend, who I later realised was actually seriously toxic and genuinely really horrible to me, and she left me with a lot of emotional scars and healing to do as an adult, a lot of which I'm still getting over now after so much healing. She got me real good. But anyway, I wrote her a really long letter and I sent it to her over Facebook Messenger, and she didn't reply, and she actually proceeded to then block me on everything, but I didn't need her to reply to me. I even said in the message that me telling her all of the information is more for me than for her to do anything with that information. And in doing that, I was able to have closure on our friendship, although it had ended almost a decade earlier. It may seem a bit pointless to you and you might be wondering why I didn't just let it go. But the trauma that I had from this relationship actually was still causing me issues all this time later, as I said. So I needed to tell her everything she had made me feel and actively express my forgiveness for what she had done. And now I've let go of all of that resentment and pain that she caused me, and I barely think about her. And I also have, I think anyway, let go of a lot of the traits, and I suppose they are actually defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms that I did develop as a result of enduring a toxic relationship for so long at such a young age. So if this sounds like something you might want to do, but you don't want to send it to them, you don't have to send it. Sometimes just writing out all of your feelings as though you're talking to them and then maybe burning it or posting it in a post box with no address is enough. I just personally felt like I should send it to her because I wanted her to know what she had done, because a big thing that played on my mind was like, is she even aware of what she has caused me? Like, is she aware? Like, does she look back on that friendship and think, I was a bit mean? Well, clearly not, because she blocked me, so... But anyway, that was closure for me. However, if you do want to send it to the person, but you're too scared, just remember that they are hopefully not in your life anymore, first of all, so it makes no difference to you what they think of what you're saying about how you're feeling. And if they are a person still in your life, and they take the information badly, they're probably better off far, far away from you. Well, they're not better off. You'll be better off with them far away from you. So I think communication can help in processing the pain and moving on if it's a feasible approach for you. Although I don't think it is a necessary step, it just depends on the situation, and it is up to you to decide. So another way to let go and forgive is ye old faithful advice, the one that I give in every fucking episode ever. Practicing mindfulness, yippee, and engaging in relaxation activities like meditation or yoga. I think releasing your emotions through writing or other expressive means is a really good way to do it. But using those in conjunction with mindfulness is really good, because then you can truly understand and be present with how you're actually feeling and how it feels to release these emotions, rather than just blurting it all out on a page. Do you know what I mean? And these practices can also help you to process and let go of these negative feelings. As I said, I mentioned before about taking things personally, so I think in order to fully forgive and let go, we need to first recognise that other people's actions often reflect their own issues and not yours. How people act and treat others is none of your business, and when people say mean things or treat people horribly, it's usually because they feel badly about themselves, or they've been taught that this is the way to treat someone, or maybe they're just having a bad time in life right now. So, developing a strong sense of self-worth through getting to know yourself and the things that truly matter to you, as well as learning how to validate yourself, can reduce the impact of external opinions and help you not to take things personally. Because if you value yourself and recognise what you're worth without the validation of others, you'll not be so affected by people's negative opinions of you either. For example, if you like the way you look and the outfit you have on, and you can just go out of the house feeling confident without needing somebody to confirm that you look good, you are far more likely to not let somebody telling you that you look bad affect the way that you feel, because you feel good. So what does it matter? Is this making sense? Is the mathing? And also the same applies to forgiveness, because when you stop taking what people do and say to you so personally, you're more likely to be able to let go and forgive people because you aren't so hurt by it. And this is a lot easier said than done, mind, and it takes a lot of mental work and strength to get to this place, but by focusing on yourself and your self-love, you will eventually get there, and it will feel incredible. Chapter 3. Important things to remember. Number 1. Forgiveness is a process. It takes time, and it takes a hell of a lot of patience. Celebrate the small steps in your journey towards forgiveness and be kind to yourself along the way. Be bloody kind to yourself. Somebody has to. Whoever you're forgiving is clearly not, even if it's yourself. So don't be the person that's not being kind to you. Number 2 is forgiveness is for you. Forgiving others is about finding peace of mind for yourself, not about excusing their behaviour. Remember, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means letting go of the hurt so it no longer controls your life. Number 3, boundaries are key. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing further harm. You need to set clear boundaries to protect your emotional health. I know that's really hard. I'm going to do a whole episode on boundaries as well. But it's perfectly okay to also distance yourself from those who continue to hurt you, even if it's family. And to be honest with you, I actually think, especially if it's family, because family should not be treating you like that. And if they are, fuck 'em, be gone, mate, be gone. Chapter 4, my favourite chapter. Journal prompts, yeah. Right, I've got quite a lot for this episode, because I've got some for self-forgiveness, some for forgiving others, and some for letting go. So I'm just going to read out a couple from each category, and then I will have the list in the description of the podcast. And also, if you check out the Instagram, all of these journal prompts and more will always go on to Instagram at some point next week. So a couple for self-forgiveness. Identify mistakes you've made and reflect on how they've contributed to your growth. Write about a time where you were too hard on yourself. What could you have done differently to show yourself more compassion? Write a letter of apology to yourself for a past mistake. What words of comfort and encouragement can you offer yourself? Now here's a few for forgiving others. Think about who in your life needs forgiveness and why. Write about a time you forgave someone. How did it make you feel? How did it change your relationship with that person? List the benefits you believe forgiveness could bring to your life and relationships. And here are a few for letting go. Write about a situation where holding on to anger or resentment has affected you negatively. What steps can you take to start letting go? Describe a time when you successfully let go of a negative emotion. How did it change your outlook or behaviour? Write about the concept of forgiveness as a journey rather than a one-time event. How can this perspective help you in your process of letting go? As I said, if you want more journal prompts or you want to see them to remember them, head over to the Instagram at Squares and Circles Pod, where I post these journal prompts and more every week. Chapter 5. What do I do now? Number 1 is to create a list of affirmations and say them to yourself every day, or listen to them every day, or read them every day, or write them every day. However you like to do your affirmations, just create a list that reinforce your forgiveness journey and ones that promise self-validation and healing, such as I am resilient, I am strong, I have the power to choose what affects me, etc. You can look them up online if you don't know what to write, and just choose the ones that resonate with you most. Number 2 is to practice mindfulness, of course. Practicing mindfulness by doing things like yoga or meditating or going on a walk, literally however you like to be mindful, even if it's just literally sitting and being present for a second. Being mindful and being present, even for just 5 minutes a day, will do wonders for your mental health and aid in your compassion and your healing process, which will aid in you letting go and forgiving, which will in turn aid in your healing process. Usually when we talk about cycles on this channel, it's a bit horrible. It's usually a horrible cycle, but this is a good one. This is a cycle that we want. So practice your mindfulness and you can actually have a good cycle for once. It's a good feeling. Number 4, I already mentioned, but try writing a letter this week. Write a letter expressing your feelings towards yourself or to others, and then you can release them in a way that feels appropriate to you. As I said, you don't have to send them, but you can post them in a letterbox, you can burn them, you can chuck them in the sea, you can literally do whatever you want, whatever feels right. You could write it all out in a note and delete it. Just do whatever feels right. Just get all of your emotions out on paper and direct them towards the person that you need to forgive, even if that's yourself. But just honestly give it a go and you'll see how cathartic it is. It's amazing. Number 4 is engaging in self-care activities. If you prioritize activities that nurture your well-being and things that make you feel good, whatever it may be, like it might be skincare, exercise, having a movie marathon, seeing your friends, having a pamper evening, or getting glammed up to go nowhere, or whatever else it is, doing these things can remind you that you are the most important person in your life, and it can remind you to place the boundaries that you need to place in order to move on with your forgiveness process, and it can also help you to let go and realize how much these things are damaging you. Forgiveness is an act of self-care, so if you forgive whatever needs forgiving and let it go, that will be an act of self-care. So if you can manage that act of self-care this week, then fan-fucking-tastic, I'm so proud of you. But if not, doing all of these other self-care activities will steer you towards the right direction in order to be able to one day forgive and let go and ultimately care for yourself as much as you possibly can. Number 5 is to seek support. If you are really struggling with a situation, you just don't know how you can even start to let go, then reach out for support. Obviously, a therapist is always a good idea, but that's very unreachable for a lot of people. However, there are a lot of support groups on Facebook, on Reddit, on any social media really, that you can find, and you can go there and talk to somebody who's also going through what you might be going through. And I think it really helps to talk to somebody that understands, because you might be able to talk to somebody who is further along in their healing and forgiveness journey than you, and they can give you tips and advice on how they got there and what they did and how they shifted their mindsets in order to align with more appropriate and more healed perspectives. And don't be scared or embarrassed to reach out. You don't even have to tell anybody. You can just go on these, and you can be anonymous on these groups as well. And that is all we've got for today. Thank you so much for tuning into Squares and Circles. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate and review us on Spotify, because that really helps it to reach other people who might need it. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Squares and Circles Pod for updates, more content and advice, as well as the journal prompts. Don't forget to share the podcast with friends, family, colleagues, or whoever else might need a little extra support on their journey to adulthood. We're all going through that here. Until next time, let's keep conquering this transition together. Bye!